NASA's secret learning method makes people learn years of material in weeks. That's not a metaphor. That's literally what it does. And by the end of this video, you'll have the exact three-part system, the same one used to train people for the most cognitively demanding job in human history, adapted into a daily protocol you can use starting tonight. Whether you're studying for JEE, preparing for placements, learning to code, or building a skill from scratch. But first, let me tell you about the day NASA almost killed its own astronauts. On purpose. Johnson Space Center, Houston. A group of astronaut trainees walk into a simulator. The instructors running the session have secretly preloaded 17 simultaneous system failures into the simulation. Fire alarm, oxygen pressure dropping, communication blackout, navigation error. One after another, everything starts going wrong at once. The trainees panic. They freeze. They make mistakes. Some of them, by simulation metrics, die. Then the instructors do something nobody expected. They run it again. Same failures, same chaos. And again, until the trainees stop panicking. Until the trainees stop thinking and start reacting. Until the correct responses stop being decisions and become something closer to breathing. One of those trainees was later asked, "What do you think about during a real emergency in space?" His answer, "Nothing. That's the point." That answer contains an entire philosophy of learning that your school never taught you. A method so effective that NASA uses it to take ordinary humans and turn them into people who can stay calm while their spacecraft is literally on fire 400 kilometers above Earth. Three principles, all backed by science, all counterintuitive, all immediately applicable to your life. And at the very end, I'm going to give you the NASA Learning Protocol, a complete 30-day system built around these three principles with a day-by-day breakdown. Not a vague, apply this mindset thing, an actual schedule. I spent time building it so you don't have to. Stay till the end. Chapter 1, the simulation principle. Stop studying, start surviving it. Here's a question. How does NASA prepare astronauts for a spacewalk? If your answer is, they read about it, congratulations, you think like every school that ever failed a student. NASA builds an enormous underwater facility called the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. It's the largest indoor pool in the world, 62 meters long, 31 meters wide, 12 meters deep. Inside it, they've submerged a full-scale replica of the International Space Station. Astronauts put on actual spacesuits and spend hours, sometimes full working days, practicing procedures underwater that they'll eventually do in space. For every 1 hour of actual spacewalk, an astronaut has trained for approximately 7 hours in that pool. 7-1. They don't read about grabbing the handrail. They grab the handrail 10,000 times until their hands know what to do without asking their brain for permission. This is what psychologists call procedural memory, and it's stored in a completely different part of your brain than the facts you memorize for exams. Procedural memory doesn't forget. It doesn't blank under pressure. It doesn't fail you when your heart rate spikes. Declarative memory, the kind you build by reading and highlighting, is fragile. Ask any student who knew the material until they opened the question paper. Now here's the embarrassing part. You've been studying almost entirely in declarative mode your whole life. Reading, rereading, highlighting the same sentence in 3 different colors because somehow the 4th time it'll stick. Making beautiful notes that you will review once and never open again. This is the academic equivalent of watching swimming tutorials on YouTube and expecting to not drown. NASA figured out decades ago what researchers like K. Anders Ericsson later confirmed. The only learning that truly transfers under pressure is learning that happened under pressure. Not simulated pressure. Not imagine you're in an exam. Actual stakes, actual performance, actual consequences for failure in the training environment. Here's how you apply the simulation principle to your life. Stop reviewing your notes. Start performing with them closed. Every single time you finish a study session, shut everything and solve problems. Explain the concept aloud or write everything you remember from scratch. Not to check yourself, to train yourself. The struggle of retrieval is the training. The discomfort of not remembering is literally your brain building the pathway that makes information stick. Your notes are the textbook. The blank page is the pool. Get in the pool. Chapter 2, Error Training. NASA trains for failure. You train to avoid it. That's why you're slower. Let me tell you something that will make every exam you've ever studied for feel slightly insulting. NASA instructors are required to make their trainees fail. It's not an accident. It's not a sign of bad teaching. It is the method. They call it error training, deliberately engineering mistakes in a controlled environment so the trainee's brain can encode in real time what wrong feels like, what the recovery looks like, and how to get from one to the other. Here's the science. When you do something correctly the first time, your brain stores the success. Fine. But when you do something incorrectly and then immediately correct it, your brain stores three things simultaneously: the wrong path, the right path, and the gap between them. You've essentially given your brain a GPS that knows both the dead end and the route around it. Researchers at Maastricht University found that people trained with deliberate error exposure performed significantly better under real-world conditions than people who were trained on flawless execution from the start. The error group adapted faster when things went wrong, because things going wrong felt familiar. Now compare that to how you study. You avoid hard questions until you feel ready. You skip problems you think you'll get wrong. You practice on the topics you already understand because it feels productive. And it does feel productive, right? That warm glow of completing 20 easy problems? That's not learning. That's your brain giving you dopamine for doing something it already knows how to do. You're not training, you're performing a skill show for yourself. Meanwhile, the questions you skipped are the exact questions that show up on the exam. NASA doesn't let trainees skip the hard simulations. The hard simulation is the lesson. Here's the principle translated. Seek your failure edge daily. Every study session should contain at least one moment where you genuinely don't know the answer. Not because you haven't studied, because the question is hard enough to expose the limit of what you currently understand. Work at that edge. Mark every wrong answer, not with shame, but with curiosity. Why did my brain go there? What does that reveal about the gap? Your wrong answers are a map to your actual knowledge. Most people fold that map up and shove it in a drawer. NASA frames their wrong answers as data. So should you. One more thing. The astronauts who came out of that 1985 session with 17 simultaneous failures, they were later studied. What separated the ones who recovered fastest wasn't IQ. It wasn't technical knowledge. It was emotional familiarity with failure. They'd felt the floor drop out before. When it happened for real, their nervous system didn't treat it as a catastrophe. It treated it as a familiar problem type. That equanimity under genuine pressure is a trainable skill, and you train it by practicing failure before failure finds you. Chapter 3, The Compression Method. How NASA packs 10 years of knowledge into 18 months. Astronaut candidates, called ASCANs, have roughly 18 months from selection to being mission ready. 18 months to become competent in robotics, orbital mechanics, spacewalk procedures, Russian language, aircraft systems, medical protocols, survival training, and approximately 47 other domains that each individually takes specialists years to master. 18 months. How is that even possible? The answer is something NASA calls mission contextualized learning, and it is the single most underused learning technique available to regular people. Here's what it means. NASA doesn't teach robotics and then separately teach orbital mechanics and then separately teach spacewalk procedures. They teach the mission. Every piece of knowledge is introduced in the context of a specific situation where that knowledge is actually needed. You don't learn the physics of orbital mechanics in the abstract. You learn it while trying to solve a specific navigation problem on a specific simulated mission. The knowledge arrives with a job to do. This is why it sticks. Your brain doesn't store information in neat subject folders the way your school curriculum implies. It stores information in experienced networks, connected to situations, to problems, to the emotional context of learning. When you learn orbital mechanics because you're trying to solve a navigation crisis, your brain files it under Navigation Crisis. Here's the tool. When you learn orbital mechanics in Chapter 6, after Chapter 5's completely unrelated content, your brain files it under Chapter 6, Probably Need for Exam, delete after. You've been feeding your brain disconnected facts for years. NASA feeds its trainees connected systems. Here's how you apply the compression method today. Learn everything in the context of a problem you're actually trying to solve. Don't study probability in the abstract. Find a JEE problem that requires probability, a hard one you can't currently solve, and learn the concept in the process of solving that exact problem. The concept arrives with a mission. Your brain assigns it a permanent address. Better yet, build something, teach something, apply it before you feel ready. The act of application creates the memory architecture that passive review never builds. The astronaut who can fix a CO2 scrubber failure at 3 a.m. after zero sleep didn't get there by reading the manual 3 times. They got there by fixing it, badly, repeatedly in simulations, until the manual became irrelevant because the hands already knew. That's the goal. Make the manual irrelevant. Get your hands into the material until the knowledge stops being information and starts being instinct. The NASA Learning Protocol, your promised bonus. Here it is. 30 days, 3 phases. Phase 1, days 1 to 10. Build the simulator. Identify the 3 hardest problem types in whatever you're currently studying. Not the ones you avoid, especially those. Every single day, attempt one of these problems with everything closed. No notes, no reference, just the problem and your current understanding. Write everything you tried, including the wrong attempts. Review what you missed. The wrong attempts are the lesson. Phase 2, days 11 through 20, error mapping. Create an error log. Every time you get something wrong, write the question, your wrong answer, the correct answer, and, this is the crucial part, why your brain went where it went. You're not cataloging failures. You're reverse engineering your own thinking patterns. After 10 days, patterns will emerge. The same conceptual gaps will appear repeatedly. Those gaps are your actual syllabus. Study those, nothing else. Phase 3, days 21 to 30. Mission mode. Pick one real deliverable. A mock test, a project, a teaching session where you explain the entire subject to someone else. Everything you study in these 10 days gets studied for that mission. Not for general knowledge, not to cover the syllabus, for that specific, upcoming, high-stakes performance. Let the mission pull the learning. That's how NASA does it. No notion required, no color-coded system, just a notebook, a pen, and the discipline to do hard things before you feel ready. Here's what all 3 principles share. NASA doesn't prepare astronauts for the ideal scenario. They prepare them for the scenario where everything is on fire and help is 400 kilometers below them. Your school prepared you for a world that mostly behaves. NASA prepares people for the world that doesn't. The simulation principle, error training, the compression method. None of these require special resources. None of them require a better textbook, a smarter teacher, or a more expensive course. They require a different relationship with difficulty, one where hard isn't the obstacle, hard is the method. The astronauts in that 1985 simulation walked out shaken. Then they walked back in. The question isn't whether you're ready to start. The question is whether you're willing to get it wrong. On purpose, immediately, repeatedly, until your brain stops calling it failure and starts calling it Tuesday. Start tonight.